Hi, I'm Traci Thomas, the creator and host of the book podcast, The Stacks, and I'm here with Litquake tonight talking at 111 Minna. Tonight we're going to be talking about how to get free in the U.S. I'm joined by three incredible authors, Carvell Wallace, whose brand new memoir is called Another Word for Love. I'm joined by Morgan Parker, who wrote an essay collection called You Get What You Pay For, and by Sam Sachs, whose new novel is called You're Dead. Thanks so much to everybody who came out tonight. We can't wait to see you next year.
Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everybody. How are you guys? Yeah, hi, I'm Traci Thomas. I'm the host of The Stacks. I'm going to be moderating us tonight. My first and most intense responsibility is to introduce our panel. So I have to pull out the note cards. I'm trying to make the note cards a thing. Like, my personality is having note cards. Because I'll tell you the quick story. I type these up, I cut them, and then I glue the writing on, right? Okay. And I've been doing, thank you, please clap. And the other day I was doing this, and I was like, do you think Oprah does this for herself? And my friend was like, wouldn't it be amazing if Oprah had like a corner of her room where she does her glam, and her like clothes are all laid out, and then she goes to the little corner with her little craft table and her little glue sticks. And so I'm like, this is gonna be my thing. And like, even when I'm Oprah, it's gonna be, you guys are gonna see me like on ABC at 4 p.m. like, here's my note card. Anyway, so with no further ado, thank you for the note card love. I'm gonna start with Morgan. Morgan Parker is a poet, essayist, and novelist. She is the author of the young adult novel, Who Put This Song On? And the poetry collections, Other People's Comfort Keeps Me Up at Night, There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce, and Magical Negro. Her newest book is You Get What You Pay For, which is a collection of essays, and she has been hailed by, I'm a professional reader. She's been hailed by the New York Times as a dynamic craftsperson of considerable consequence to American poetry. That is Morgan.
I made them put that in my bio.
I love it.
You know, I'm always, like, my mom calls me and I'm like, I'm of considerable consequence, so.
Yeah. So it's actually Miss Morgan to you. Okay, next up is Sam Sachs. Sam is the author of You're Dead, which was just longlisted for this year's National Book Award. We celebrate our wins here. They are also the author of the poetry collections Pig, Bury It, and Madness. They've received fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts and Yaddo, and are currently a lecturer at Stanford University. And finally, we've got Carvell Wallace. Carvell is the co-author of the New York Times best-selling basketball memoir, The Sixth Man, with Andre Iguodala. We can be Warriors-friendly here, I feel. His newest book is a memoir called Another Word for Love, which was released in May and was a finalist for the Kirkus Prize this year. Yes, I know. Carvell worked as a stage actor before spending 15 years in direct service youth nonprofits. As a journalist, he has covered arts, entertainment, music, culture, race, sports, and parenting. And as a podcast host, he has been nominated for a Peabody and won a Kaleidoscope Award. He lives in Oakland and has 2 adult children, a comfortable couch, and a lot of plants. I feel like when we talk about a prestigious panel, this is what we're talking about. Stanford, plants, dynamic hailedness, and note cards. Okay, so tonight the title of our panel is How to Get Free, Healing in the USA. Yeah, it's an oof title, for sure. I have a prompt, and I hope you all have answers, because I think people are gonna be taking notes. So you need to tell us exactly like how to get free.
I have more questions.
Okay,
So if that'll suffice.
Just like a poet to have more questions. But before we get to that, I think we should just quickly allow you each to talk about your newest book, just so folks. How many of you have read at least one of these books? Okay, how many of you have read 2? Oh shit. Anybody besides me read all 3?
Holy Trinity?
You have homework.
Someone's going for the hat trick.
Yes, that's
the right thing, right? Hat trick?
It's a hat trick, that's right. Sports. So tell them, because they don't all know. So Morgan, why don't you start and give them like, you know, your quick, whatever, not too quick, but quick pitch.
Okay, my book, You Get What You Pay For, it's a collection of essays, personal essays about, I mean, the most personal of them are about me in a therapist's office, various therapists' office through my life. And then the other essays are related to making an argument for therapy as reparations. So most of the book is very personal, like looking at the inside of my brain, whether it's dissecting the Big Pimpin' video, or how difficult it is for me to get a date. It's all kind of leading to this idea of psychological freedom and healing.
What a great description.
These two also are up to the same thing. I can't say that I've read these books, and yes, there is freedom and suffering.
Definitely suffering. This is my first novel. It came out in August, and there are die-cut eyes in the design, and like a little person smoking a cigarette on the interior.
Oh wow.
Stunning. Okay, but that's not what it's about exactly. It's a book, it's a novel set in and around a political self-immolation in 2016. And that's sort of how it opens with the main character, Ezra. And the world of the book happens in these like little lyric vignettes or fragments of memory that ricochet back through like their life. Yeah, and through their like early childhood, like all of the various sort of events that informed or formed their thinking or their identity, and it also like goes back further through their diasporic family history. And I think in some ways it's an argument for like against the linearity of history, right? Because it happens like achronologically, and so like it has all of these different sort of fragments of memory side by side. And that is the book. I think, yeah, applause.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Another Word for Love is a book about recovering from childhood trauma. It's actually about first getting the trauma, like acquiring the trauma, and then recovering from it. And the book is in 3 sections, and the first sections are stories about loss, and which is just remembrances of when important things were taken from me through trauma. And then there's a little brief section called Stories About God, which is just kind of meditations on trying to find something to touch or hold on to make one real. And then the final section is Stories About Reunion, which is vignettes from mostly my adult life, moments in which I have tried to reconnect with what was taken from me in childhood. So that's how the book works.
I'm not gonna try to sell you the books, okay? But I've read all 3 and they're actually really good books. Sometimes I do this and they're not. I'll just be honest with you since we're friends. But sometimes, you get paired with people and it's like you love one and then, but like, they're all really, like they actually do the thing that they set out to do. So if any of those things sound interesting to you, it's actually in the book. Because sometimes authors will be like, my book's about dogs. And I'm like, this is a book about cats. But I digress. I want to know, it's 2024. It's like an extremely political moment, both like with the election, but also just broadly politics feel very front and center. And I think when we talk about and think about freedom, we're talking and thinking a lot, or when we talk and think about politics, we're really talking and thinking about freedom and possibility and like what this looks like. But I'm curious what it's like to actually write into this moment. You start these books, you start these essays, your life starts long before the world that it enters into, but what is that like for you preparing to actually put your thing into this moment?
I kind of want to hear you talk about this, Sam, because I was writing into the moment in my book, but I'm slow. and I'm, I wasn't a journalist for this reason, because it takes me a long time to understand what I think about things, like in a responsible way, you know what I mean? So a lot of my book ends, I think in like 2019, and it just came out this year. So, and like literally even someone on Goodreads was like, I wonder if it's because of her mental health that she could not complete this book on time. Because it probably would have been better if it came out
read the
at
Goodreads
this time.
reviews.
Oh, I love them. I love them. Oh yes, my people are in there. I mean, and honestly, I was like, yes, sis. That's what happened. Like, that's exactly what happened. And yeah, maybe it would have been, you know what I mean? Like, yes, but like, that's the reality of trying to write through these things while the things are fucking happening. Yes, if I had pitched the book, here's all my mental health and politics and blah, 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 you know, when I sold it. And if I could just write it on time and nothing around my world was disturbed, sure, great. But in the time, guess what? I still am suffering from mental illness. The world is still suffering, well, from mental illness, you know what I mean? And all of that, even when you're looking back and trying to write about, like I'm trying to write about Michael Brown. And then more people just keep getting it, you know? So it really was a thing where I wasn't able to write into the moment at all. I mean, there's an essay in the book that's like, yo, I should have finished this book. I wasn't gonna keep that in, I just kept it at the end because it's like, this is really what it was. It's not just about what I wrote, it's about what happened while I was writing it. Not only to me, but you know, to all of us and to the truth that I was writing from the beginning. You know what I mean? Like, I think about this a lot with poetry, that it grows with the world, you know? And with nonfiction, it's even more so when you're talking about being a witness of a particular time, but being aware that it's gonna be read outside of that time. And a lot of what I was writing was like, you know, we're talking about linear, you know I don't believe in linear time. We know this about each other. So I can just act like, you know, we don't have to establish linear time is fake and it's white and blah, blah, blah. But like that was a lot of what I was dealing with of like, I'm not, if I'm writing about now, I'm writing about then, and I'm writing about then, and I'm writing about then, and I'm writing about this, and I'm writing about that.
Exactly.
So there was never really, I'm reflecting on what's happening right now. I'm reflecting on what happened in 1954. It just is still happening, because motherfuckers aren't reflecting. You know what I mean? Like, it was kind of that, where like, I'm doing, like when Trump won the first time, the first thing I did was like, go back and read like people writing against Italian fascists. You know what I mean? Like that was, I was like, oh, I think Weber has something to say. You know what I mean? Like I look back. I think that was a really important part of the process of writing this book in terms of how am I gonna respond to now? Because you can't, like we're not, I don't know everything. But the power that we do have is to look back and distill what we're learning from what's already out there, and then, you know, being able to apply it. But that takes a lot of time, approximately 6 years.
Shall we go on a line?
We can go on a line this time, but we're not gonna stay linear, okay?
Let's fuck it up.
It's racist, it's homophobic,
It's true.
it's fucking bullshit. So this is the end of the line.
Down with white
you guys.
supremacist linear
Go
narrative.
back.
Don't embarrass me in front of these people. I posed a question and you guys are linear.
I was working as a bookseller around that election, and it was wild how quick everyone wanted to read like Hannah Arendt and Fanon and stuff right after that. And like, like they used critical theory and critical race studies section just like
They knew,
up.
like someone has been through this. It's not, you know, the minute everyone's like, how did this happen? That's when I want to throw up my hands, you know, because we can find out how it happened.
I began this book in 2016, so it took me like 7 years to make it. And it was wild to watch as it like slowly became historical fiction, you know, and I had to like sort of make, like remind myself what living in that context was as like things continued to get worse. And so, I had like playlists that sort of rooted me in my 2016-ness as I was like trying to embody Ezra in relationship to the political context and violence that they were moving through. Yeah, I don't know. I think at the heart of this book is also what the feeling of being alone at a protest is, at a demonstration, right? To be surrounded by people who share a similar political ideology and can see the moment of a demonstration as a space where the past meets the violence of the present, and everyone's trying to imagine what a new world might look like. While also reproducing its own kind of violence. And so it's also what is that feeling of having all of these inherited protest strategies and narratives that have been co-opted and exploited, right, by neoliberalism, by capitalism, right? I'm thinking of that Kylie Jenner ad where she gives a cop of Pepsi, and then it you know, and so there's an odd sort of prescience to the book because it's about, it's about a self-immolation, which feels very contemporary. But I don't know, as I was researching it, you know, it goes back to before antiquity.
Self-immolation is also it's so classical. It's the most primal, classical way of protest.
Yeah. And in early expressions of martyrdom. And as I was working on this book, there were 6 or 7 sort of very public, affective, political self-immolations that shaped the trajectory of how I was thinking about this book and how it was moving. And so, I don't know, I mean, I think to write honestly about the present is also always to engage with history and imagining what a future might look like. And yeah, I think that makes a text have a sort of affective present feeling quality, even if it's deeply invested in what came before it, right? Which is what language is, right? An inheritance that you're reshaping to make something new. Yeah.
I mean, similarly, I like to avoid trying to, I have this disorder where I keep trying to back up and see the bigger picture, and then I keep backing up. And with this book, I thought the biggest thing I could get to is based on a piece that I wrote, I think for Medium, was doing this thing that's word of the year in 2017. And the word I picked was trauma. And the reason I picked that word was not because it was trendy, but because I was thinking about how, I actually was thinking about Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and how there's a mythology in the beginning of that story about 2 people being separated and then spending the rest of their lives looking for one another. And that felt this idea of separation and then trying to find your way back to what is missing just felt such a through line through all of human suffering, that when I arrived at trauma as a definition of to be separated from what used to be one, you and safety used to be one, you and home used to be one, you and wholeness used to be one, you and God used to be one, and now because of this traumatic act that has happened to you, you're separated from that, and then you spend the rest of your life trying to find your way back to that through methodologies that are sometimes useful, sometimes absolutely insane, sometimes violent, but that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get back to what was lost. And so I wrote that piece in 2017, and the thing that I thought was interesting about the moment then, post-Trump and white backlash and all this stuff, was that it used to be that trauma was ghettoized the same way that toxic waste was. That you're gonna dump all the toxic waste in this area and we're not gonna have to see it. And so the people who are in that area have been working with waste and trauma forever, but everyone else has been in avoidance. But what was happening is that it was bleeding into everything now. And now people who've never had to deal with trauma are confronted with it, and they don't know what the fuck to do. And they're freaking out, and they're fucking protesting, and they're joining militias, and they're just they're stacking toilet paper, and just people are just bugging the fuck out. And so I thought, well, if we could all maybe learn how to deal with trauma better, maybe that would help people deal with the reality of this. Because all that's happening is that people are becoming aware that this world is fucked. And people who have never had to confront that in any real way are seeing that for the first time, and they don't know what the fuck to do. And their inability, their thrashing and flailing about is hurting everyone. So it felt to me like I wanted to deal with trauma as a concept. And then it was well, because I have this theory that if you tell the truth, you can predict the future because the truth never changes. And so then it just became a matter of trying to write the truest possible thing I could and trusting that it would be then relevant to whatever time. And so if someone read this 20 years later and found a dog-eared copy in a library, that they would understand something about this time and about their own time, because this is a focus on human stories. So that's kind of how I tried to respond to the present.
Okay.
I love that it began with the origin of love from Hedwig.
I'm telling you, the books are really good. It's all in the books.
Yeah.
This is a question that I have for all of you, but I want to start with you because you sort of started with this, which is, how are you thinking about audience? How are you thinking about writing about these truths for some people who are sitting on the stage being like, yeah, and some people who are bumping up against trauma for the very first time in this public way, and like finding a truth that feels real for people who know it and experience it, and also people who are just like, what is this feeling?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer to that. Like, at a certain point, I stopped thinking about audience. I just kind of had to trust that if I did what felt valid to me, that the audience would, whoever found it would be whoever needed to find it. And a lot of people would find it and be like, what the fuck is this? And those people are all in Goodreads, God bless them. And so, okay, it's not for you now. It's like, you know, but that I would find the people who needed to find it. And as a writer, I know that historically, I've been aware that a lot of my readers are white. Actually, I have a white aunt who partially raised me. She's in the book, and I was talking to her on the phone about this book, and she said, she's a boomer. She said, how come all the people who like the book are young white ladies? And I was like, well, I mean, that's who's in publishing. That's, you know, that's who like makes up this world. But, so I'm always aware that that's a thing, but I don't try to write for that audience. Maybe when I was first starting out as a writer, I was like doing a little bit of trying to please whoever I thought would like me kind of thing. But at this point, it's like, I just have been making work long enough to know that the more honest I am, the more I will find the right audience, whoever that happens to be. And, you know, that's kind of how I thought about it.
Can I answer for Carvell? Because I feel like it's in storytelling in your book, is how it's like, I'm telling you a story.
Yeah.
So you can receive it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm putting the honesty in a story, which everyone loves a story.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's presented in this, and you're really a good storyteller.
Oh,
so that is, I don't know, for me when I was reading your book, and I blurbed it, so I really did spend some time with it, but really that was what, in terms of that audience thing, I'm like, you have that because you're just such an incredible storyteller that whatever people are approaching it with, they're in the story, and then they're just, you know, they have to be in, you know.
I do believe that storytelling is a little bit of the spoonful of sugar that makes the medicine go down. You know, and I like feel really valid about that. I will say that when the book was chosen for No Names Book Club, which was so, like, that was the thing I felt most proud of. And I went to LA to the book club meeting to like talk with people there. And I hadn't thought about this particular audience member until they came and talked to me. And they said, you know, when you wrote about your mother and what you went through with her and how you guys struggled for home, this person said to me, I was that mother. I was the one who couldn't find a home for my children and lost custody of them, and I've been fighting to get them back. And it never even dawned on me that I was writing a story for that person too. I thought I was writing for all the children whose mothers weren't there, or whatever. But, and then to have this person come to me and say, and so just reading about this, it was difficult, but it helped me feel whole. It was that, I was like, oh yeah, that's the gamble that pays off when you write truthfully and honestly, you know?
And in a storytelling way, which is not writing some kind of like treatise.
That's right.
You're not writing to or at. You know what I mean?
That's
like you're just, I'm telling my story.
Yeah.
And what you get is what you get.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, which I think is, not everyone can do that. You know, and I think about that in nonfiction, where I really don't think that everyone can put truth in storytelling in that same way. A lot of folks have to employ some kind of preacherly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially in thinking about specific audiences.
Yeah.
That is, to be able to wield that tool, I think is something.
I think when we talked about this, I'm like losing my voice in real time tonight. I swear to God, when I got here, I had a voice. When we talked about this on the show, you and I share a background as actors, and we talked about that part of storytelling and like being okay with being vulnerable in front of an audience and not feeling like you had to put on an extra thing that is a thing that you learn and practice.
I think that there's a default setting as an essayist, and I see this when I teach students who, especially journalists who are writing personal essays for the first time. One of the things they really struggle with is how do I tell the truth but sound authoritative? And I'm like, oh, well, you just cut off the second part. You don't have to sound authoritative. You just tell the truth, and the truth is where the authority comes from. But I think a lot of us who are, we do a lot of reading of like essayists who are like, and furthermore, and therefore, and henceforth. And so, everyone wants to be, I want to sound like a furthermore, and henceforth type of dude. So people are doing that, and it's just all in the way of their writing. And it's like, no, let's remove all this. Just say what's true, dog. Just say what's true.
Okay, Sam, I'm gonna do this next one for you. But it's for all of you.
Everything's for all of you. It's like the dating game up here.
It is. It's like
Bachelor number 3.
Bachelorette number 2.
If I were an ice cream cone.
Violence.
I mean, don't bring
Bachelorette.
that up if there's no option of me going home.
I'm the Bachelorette. Your option is to come home with me, whether or not I have a voice. Okay, violence. Big part of your book. Because of this self-immolation, right? Like, I think I heard someone once say that self-immolation is the most violent form of nonviolent protest. And I mean, you all sort of talk about trauma, violence, pain, self-harm, these things. And I'm wondering, like, what is valuable to you as a storyteller in digging into that part of it? Because I think sort of the flip part of this question is that, especially in recent years, there's always this push of like, I want to see the joy in marginalized group stories. I want the Black joy. I don't want this trauma. I want the, So I'm sort of wondering about writing towards a thing that is so in your face, like, fuck that other ideology. So what is the value for you in writing into those spaces?
Yeah, thanks for that. That also dovetails into the last question in kind of an interesting way with the audience.
Dovetail.
Yeah, we love the tail of a dove.
Came from this dove.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the question of audience, like I came up through like performance poetry, and so there's like something about the accountability of speaking your work in front of people and like having that like yoked to your body to like mean that you have to be accountable for your language and for the choices you make in your writing. Also, all my earliest sort of lessons in this were that like veering into what feels most like troubling and complex and multivalence is where like interesting, complex, multivalence work comes from. That like pushes like into your sub-psyche and spiritual spaces and makes you like think differently about your relationship to the world. Yeah, so this book opens with like a pretty violent gesture, right? There's like a content warning that opens the book as well, just to invite people into the book with a kind of care, right? That like, if you're not like ready to sit with this, then like perhaps like this is a book that's not for you right now. But there's something to me in like the unknowability at the center of this type of political and emotional gesture that feels like so rich and expansive. I had like like when I was first going to protest, there was like a bunch of self-immolations that were like never reported about, right? That were like, or that were like a part of activist circles and used as a way of like imagining like a future together and like pushing a drive together. And then also there was like a political self-immolation associated with my family. That's like not my story to tell, but that was also like deeply, deeply unknowable. And so there's something to me about like opening the book with the clarity of this act, and then having the rest of the book be a complex sort of prism of like specific opacity, that it's like all of these things lead this person toward this gesture, but there's no like specific answer to what drove them to do it. Yeah. In fact, there was like a note like that I had originally written that I then like scrubbed out to make it like illegible in the book. And so I think for me, it's like an invitation to sit with that trouble, or to sit with that discordantness, and have us ask ourselves like how we move through the world that is unlivable, right? That is, not a place for joy, right? So like, how do you eke out joy even inside of that? And I think by like staring into perhaps what's most troubling and discordant in our world, in our lives, like we can come to a more interesting answer than just like, oh, being together, or like, oh, like food, I don't know, Yeah.
Yeah.
What's my thinking around that?
Anybody else want to go on that? Or I've got more dovetails. Okay.
Wait, hold on. Sorry.
No.
I have to think about things. I think I've been thinking a lot about this, because even since I put this book out, like literally everyone from my oldest best friend to my aged have been like, so how about for the next book, it's something that doesn't make you want to go to the hospital. You know what I mean? Like it's very, like it's coming from a good place, but it's also like, how about you write about something fun? That would be cool for you. That'd be a good, cute look, writing about something fun. And I'm just like, I would really love to, like I almost feel like this book was a dare to be like, give me something fun to write about. You know what I mean? Like I really want to. I'm trying to get the best that I can out of the most garbage. And like, it's me posing to you like, don't you want me to write something fun? You know what I mean? Like I'm floundering, I'm observing the world, and I'm not seeing the good. I'm not seeing it enough to want to like reflect on it or reflect it back or whatever. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I really struggle with that question, because it's like, I don't want to hurt myself any more than I have to in my process, in my artistic process. And I don't want to be like a martyr of art, but I do want to tell the truth. So it becomes this, you know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna be like, okay, so now in this next book, it's a rom-com about a cute young thing. You know what I mean? But like, what do you want me to do? It's just more therapists, unless something changes. And we're all gonna have to sit with that, Like it's not that I wanna like punish my reader, but it's more like, if I have to feel this, then you do too. I can't just sit down for hours of a day and try to spin some cutesy yarn to make you feel better when I still feel so shitty.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of audience, I guess coming back to that is like, I want my audience to be with me. And, too bad I'm lonely, you gotta come with me in this.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's fun, a lot of times it is not. And like, yeah, I don't know. I thought about it a lot with this book, actually, especially because with poems, I'm able to like put a glitter on it or whatever. And like, white women, for example, love There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce. And then this book is just like, here's my thing about white women. There's literally a sentence that says that. So it's really like, get ready for them to leave. Like they're tired, they gotta take off their high heel shoes. But I'm still here, and as long as I have to be, it's within my power to bear witness of that, as uncomfortable as it is. And so really it's like a dare to the audience to like, give me something good to talk about.
Well, I just want to add that I do think it does raise this question of audience in a way, because I think part of what I was struggling with was some people need to sit with this, and some people have been sitting with this as long as I have.
Yeah.
And so I need something for them too in there. And I think for me, I remember I was doing a profile of Terrell Alvin McCraney for the Times Magazine, and I asked him this question about Black pain. This is like 2018, so it's like we're sort of like at the end of Black Boy Joy cycle of like hashtagging. And so I was like, yo, do you ever feel like you're like trading your pain for rent money? Like, you know what I mean? Like, do you ever feel like that? Because sometimes I feel that type of way, and I don't really. And we had a long conversation about Black pain and artists, and we talked about Lil Wayne, you know, and his suicide attempt, and we talked about, you know, Phyllis Hyman, and we talked about all these. And then at one point he said, well, yes, I understand that it feels that way, but also we have to ask ourselves why the pain is there to begin with.
Yes.
And somehow that became like a guiding light for me when I was writing this book, that like, I'm not just giving you my pain so that you feel like satisfied that you got my pain, and you know, because I think that there's a screwy, oppressive power dynamic that comes when the reader is like, if the reader is the member of an oppressive group, then they're like, I feel so bad about your pain, and now I feel great because I spent some time feeling bad.
And now I'm educated because I read Morgan Berger's book.
But no power has changed.
And they still bump into me on the street.
And so that's why for me a lot of the book was about like questions of how does one persist in love and humanity given this, and that wasn't for the readers who get off on, who like have a fetish for Black pain. That was for the readers who have lived with Black pain for generations. It was my call out to them, and that's why that third section begins with an invocation of my grandmother and my great-grandmother and my great-great-great-grandmother. I brought them in to be like, now let's talk about how we live, and this is for us.
Okay, this is exactly where I wanted to go. You guys get questions soon, okay? So this is gonna be my last one, I think. I hope not, but maybe. I wanna know, you know, the conversation starts with how do we get free or whatever. And I think, again, in this moment, publicly, politically, there is this idea that freedom is like a thing that we can get individually. And also this idea that freedom is a thing that we can only achieve collectively. And there's so much in between those two options. And so I'm wondering how each of you are thinking about personal freedom and then what you have to give up or you know, can't get in order to pursue that collective freedom. Because like what I'm sort of hearing from each of you is like, you know, you wrote this book, it's about your personal trauma, it's about your personal story, whatever, but also it's for other people. But also you don't want to just write for other people who need to learn about this stuff, you want to write for other people who've experienced it for yourself. So like, what is that trade-off for you between that personal freedom and then that sort of reach for a collective freedom? And I know all of you have thought about this because I've read your work, and I know you're thinking about it on the page, but I'd love to hear how you're thinking about it or how you're approaching these questions.
I know it sounds like I didn't come to a hopeful conclusion in my book, and I didn't, and I haven't in my body, but
Hi, yes.
I mean, even in the act of writing this and writing it toward my audience, which is my kin, you know what I mean? There's no, I really resisted like explaining, you know what I mean? But I wanted to explain the ins and outs, like the very nuanced details of my particular Black depression. And that is like, it's funny because it's like, there's certain things I've explained for whites, but this wasn't that. This was like, I need to explain this like for me and for all of us, because like there has to be an articulation. And it felt, it felt like an explaining myself to my people versus explaining my people to other people. And there's something different in that. There's a little bit more possibility of togetherness that can come from that. From me being like, I'm here, are you guys here? This is what my story is what's your story? Can we go forward together? And I think that's actually, the opposite would have been for me to just, I mean, either not write the book and lay down and die, or, you know, write the book in this way that's like, here's my Black pain, and like all these white girls pay me, and then I die. You know what I mean? Like, but like, it really is that the best thing that you can hope to do in telling that story to others is set an example for you know, I mean, I think about like younger cousins and those folks, but also just looking laterally and just like checking for allies, you know, rather than trying to appeal to some larger thing, just like presenting yourself for service. You know, like that's how I think of it. It's like checking in, reporting for duty with my trauma. How can I help us? You know, that's really how I think of what I can offer.
Yeah, I think at the heart of this book, and this is not nonfiction, but like we have a lot in common. Although, speaking of Goodreads, someone left a comment that was like, Sam Sachs isn't interesting enough for autofiction. And then I was like, that's clearly not me, and maybe real.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for Ezra, like at the heart of their journey also is like a question of belonging. And one of the lenses of that belonging is in and around like Judaism and like searching for a mode or model of Judaism that works for them. And this is like a diasporist, anti-Zionist book at its heart, and which is like one of the gestures that like also ties into to audience, right? Like writing a book for like other anti-Zionist, like Jewry and other anti-Zionists. But you know, like they keep sort of encountering these models of Judaism, like their father's in like a cult, like a Hasidic adjacent cult. They like go on in a birthright adjacent program and are like, this is not for me. And then like they see the sort of like undercurrent of the violence. That's part of that sort of propaganda campaign. And then they have like Marxist, but like bougie family that also are like bad family members. And so it's actually through like this fiction of their father's storytelling. Their father like invents these like made up Jewish folk tales that they can like find themselves like rooted in history. And so like which like sort of highlights like the sort of power of storytelling to set up the parameters of a people, to imagine a future, and for all of us to live in that world together. And that like the facts of history in a lot of ways can like narrow or restrict or reenact like the violence of history, but like being able to like co-create experience together like is like one way to imagine like collectivity and healing. But also, I want to talk about like the title of the panel. Like I don't know if the USA to me feels like any like nation state project feels like kind of like a site of like a violence. So it's like healing inside of it might not be the most useful way to think about like how to imagine like collective healing. Yeah.
Like, is it possible even?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Seems unlikely.
And then, okay, let's get without. Like,
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I mean, I think at the end of the book, I do talk a little bit about, I mean, my answer to that in the book, I think is a little unsatisfying to people, and it maybe feels a little bit like a cop-out, because low-key, I just sort of believe kind of in magic. Like, I believe in like the you know, sort of like limited application of magic to certain problems, and like in addition to other shit too, but you throw in a little magic. And I think that there's I do believe that to heal myself is to heal my ancestry and to heal my progeny and whoever I'm ancestors for. I do believe that. And I also believe that you can, or that one can, create freedom in such a way as to open up a portal for others to more easily walk through. That's not to be like messianic about it. I just think that that's like a thing that can happen. And that's your little contribution. And there's 7 billion people. So even if you opened up the biggest portal you could, it would still be like a little tiny one on the whole kind of like scale of the planet. But that is kind of how I think of it. And so I think in the book I talk about like, all of these systems were imagined. This USA that we can't get free in is a thing that was created. Someone made that up. And someone made up all this stuff. And so then other stuff can be made up. And so I think part of how I've come to see my job as a writer, in addition to what you just said about storytelling, which I think is, you know, the power of storytelling is that it gives people a frame through which to view reality. Like when I was growing up, I was an obsessive TV watcher. So I'd go home and like watch an episode of like whatever sitcom, and then I would look out in the world and everything would be like in that sitcom. And from that I learned that like when we tell stories, we create a frame for people to view reality through. And so as a storyteller, that's part of my contribution, is like, here's a way that you can view reality. Here are references and connections that you can make when you interact with the world outside of you. And I think that my little piece is to make the possibility of freedom more imaginable. Like it's, the job is to make revolution irresistible, all that. Like, I think that's the best I can contribute. And I'll do my little part, and some folks will pick up on it, and they'll be more equipped to do stuff than I ever have been.
Right, that's the thing. It's just like pushing the door a little bit.
Someone will come along and be like, oh, this guy could barely get his toe through the door. Fuck this, I'm kicking this thing down. And I will have just opened it a little bit, and I think that's part of the collective project of freedom. But my expectations are right-sized. I no longer believe, like I did when I was 19, that I can make art and free the world, and I'm gonna, I don't believe that now. I believe that I get to make my contribution. And what I do the rowing, and it's like God does the steering. I don't know where it's all gonna end up. I just know that I get up every day and do my contribution, and the rest is out of my hands.
Do any of you lovely people have questions? Don't be shy. I mean, I have more. Yes?
Mostly for Sam and Morgan, but
Damn. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay.
It's too easy.
Is it about poems?
What's different and what's the same between like writing, in Sam's case, the first novel, or Morgan writing essays and also fiction? Like, what's the same with writing a book of poetry and what's different? And then also putting that book into the world after already having made a name for yourself as a poet. What's the same feeling? What's different?
Can everyone hear that question? Okay.
Yeah. As far as the making of it, it doesn't really feel very different from me. Like, I think poems, to me, all genre is an outgrowth of poetry. Do you know what I mean? Like, poems, I feel like, are like the first utterance, one of the first art forms, and then like the novels, 600 years old, and so I don't know, it's sort of building upon that tradition. The main difference for me is around reception and there being all these apparatuses that treat the work radically different, and having to sort of navigate that and be oh, I don't have the same freedom I did to talk about the sort of the line, or the image, or how my relationship to language is transformed my life. I have to talk about narrative and plot, which I also don't agree with, and so I feel like I'm learning on the backside sort of how to do that, but it's been useful. I don't know, at the heart of my I read Ursula Le Guin's essay on the carrier bag theory of fiction, which sort of built a lot of the structure for this, which was really useful to sort of eschew a lot of the narrative conventions of the hero's journey or whatever, but yeah, I think so it's been most useful to find models of poets who write in other genres, or who, thinkers or writers who can hold the sort of contradictory opacity of different writing practices. Yeah, but I don't know. Book talk is different. Fiction book talk is a whole other thing that I hadn't, I didn't know that existed, and I was like, wow, y'all are really powerful. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, book talk. And just being I've been out here and you guys just don't know who I am or don't care. You know what I mean? That's interesting. YA, that was a real thing. But I think because my first novel was young adult, I mean, I don't know, I go back and forth. If I had not written a young adult novel, it would have been weirder than that. It would have been no vignette, it would have been whatever. But because it's in this different market where there's there are expectations of format, and it still was a little bit, I mean, according to Goodreads, it was all crazy, but I felt like I had to learn the rules a little bit more in terms of structure and just sentences and shit like that, you know what I mean? So the way that I thought about, I didn't think about my essays in that way though. The way I thought about essays was very similar to the way that I thought about poems in terms of here's a couple of touch points that I'm gonna arrive at, and it's gonna kind of go like this, and here's where I'm beginning and here's where I'm ending, but there's no really end, it's just a feeling, but I did struggle with that even in the essay form, because people expect a synthesis. And I really wanted to force resistance to that synthesis but play with the essay format. You know what I mean? Play with the expectation of the synthesis.
Which is the most poet shit you can do.
Which is that's like me, but that's why it takes a little bit longer, because I'm like, I see what we're swirling around, and like, you're just not gonna get it. It's like, in the end, it all worked out fine. You're not gonna get that. So how do you end the essay then about loneliness? You know what I mean? When there's no, what happens in the end? You know? So really trying to figure out how to make an essay a poem in that way, where you can end with a question or an opening of a window versus ending with a solution of any kind, because there's no fucking solutions to mental illness and loneliness in America. I tried, did not find one, but I can pose questions. So trying to like form the genre into the way I think about literature, you know, and like what it can do. It was more that than interrogating like what the structures of the genre are. And I did the same thing with the YA, but it really did force me to think about what all the rules are, you know, and writing for young people and knowing that they have certain expectations. I wasn't gonna give it all to them, and I really wanted to respond to the teens that didn't have expectations and were like me. But there is something to be said about working within a structure and then like queering that in a particular way. So I had a lot of fun with that, but I do think it made it so that my future prose books and then writing a screenplay for the novel, like all of that, I was a little bit more in tune with what narrative was adding to lyricism. You know, because I lead with lyricism. You know, I'm like, I know what you're gonna feel, right? But what's gonna happen? Like, I had to become more invested in that.
Graham, can we do one more? Okay, Graham's in charge. Anyone else have a question?
Thanks for that, also.
Yeah.
No?
Go check out the Golden Sardine. It's a great poetry wine bar in North Beach that Andrew runs.
Oh.
Yeah. Or, sorry, should I have done that? No.
Yes, do that.
He doesn't like when people go to his bar.
Anyone else? Yes?
So you've all spoken like very strongly about how therapy plays a role in your writing. Do you ever feel as writers do you think that there is a line that you can cross that makes you a therapist? Or do you feel like you stay away from that line, or it's all just blurry?
I tell all my readers to go to real doctors. I'm like, go be to a therapist. This is good, but also, in addition to real doctors, you know? I'm very, and I have a lot of young readers, so I'm very like, I don't know. I feel very passionately about that, like the poetry's not therapy thing. I think it's like a really, really, really scary, dangerous line for young folks who actually are depressed. Therapeutic, yes, you know, but I think a lot about writing and my writing and having conversations about mental illness as therapeutic and part of a process. But yeah, I think that, it just adds, because it's a communal way of doing what you're doing in your individual practice in therapy, right? Like, so you're able to like then apply what is personal and intimate into a real world and talk about it with real people. But it's not the same. And yeah, I often am like saying that to people, because I'm like, if you feel better, that's great, but way to go feel much more better.
Yeah, definitely go to therapy, but also my last therapist, which I just ended things with, is here in the Bay Area, and like they would do tarot readings, and we're like really into like Jungian like archetypes, and so that made the line really blurry for me, because I was like, I need a clinician to like prescribe me shit, and you are like doing what my cousin does that I like.
I'm like,
that is like actually not helping, not actually helping me.
Next time you come over, like, I'll do that.
But you know, I mean, I think therapy is as like porous and complicated as literature with its own fuck traditions and history. My first book is kind of about it too. About like the history of the DSM and diagnostic processes. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think they all like help I think literature in a lot of ways helps you like orient your relationship to the present and history and to what's possible. And therapy for me is like, you know, how to like survive the present. I guess those are the same things. Yeah, I don't know.
The combination for me is like really ideal.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't have been able to write a lot of what I've written without therapy. And then like I'll write something and then I'm like, well, I know what I'm talking about in therapy. You know what I mean? Like it's like, I kind of have to have both things. I'm reflecting on one within the other and going back and forth. I'm learning more about myself in one and applying that to the other and, you know, back and forth. But I think that's the important part, right? Like to not put it all in one vessel to like save you. It's a matter of like, what can I get from all of these places and piece together?
Right. Well, therapy is dynamic too. It's like you talk and then your therapist reflects and then you reflect back some things and that's not, even the best writing can't do that. It's, you know, and so it never even dawned on me that someone could think of my writing as the therapist. It was therapeutic for me. Like I had a personal experience in writing it that was pretty helpful. I actually, you know, I started off, I was in therapy way early on, like when I first started, and I was even recording my sessions, because I was like, yeah, this is great material, it's gonna be so dope in the book. But none of it ended up in the book, just because I couldn't even bother to go back and like peel through that tape. And so, for me, the writing was therapeutic because it allowed me to work through things that I had questions about on the page and seeing the reflections back and seeing stuff that didn't make sense or that did make sense that I thought wouldn't make sense until I read it out. But I don't expect my readers to have that experience with me because it's not dynamic. It's not, they're not giving me anything. You know, like when you write, you give to the page gives back. When you read, the reader just gives, the page just gives. So I would never expect to like replace the dynamics of relationships, which therapy is one form. I think the thing about it is that it's a relationship. Yeah. It's a dynamic, changing relationship that is, you know, between parties. Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Graham. Keep going.
Take one more if you want.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of this was like
Loud. That's my family. I can yell it.
I know a lot of this was like difficulty in seeing joy in the world. And through this conversation, I'm reflecting a lot about our enslaved ancestors and the way that they were able to create joy and seek joy through the worst of experiences. And so like I wonder, through therapy, through experiences, how have you all been able to, even though shit sucks, how are you able to identify bright spots that resonate with you to keep you motivated doing what you're doing to feed us?
Can everyone hear that?
Sorry if not.
How are they finding joy and bright spots to stay motivated to do the work? There was a better part of that question, but that's the center. Carvell, you start.
Well, the book, I think, is very much about that. Like, it not only is about that, it is that.
It is
and I
that.
think that's a big thing that I talked about kind of with my editor a lot, that the book isn't about healing, it is the healing.
Yeah.
You know, and so I don't want to do that thing that some Black writers do where we do a lot of fan fiction about our enslaved ancestors that isn't grounded. And so I was wary of throwing a fantasy onto them, right? I went to them, I invited them in, I did a little speculation about moments, but I tried to keep it like grounded with me. But what I found that there were certain materials that allowed me to connect with joy more easily. And almost all those materials had to do with the natural world. It had to do with the sun and the moon and the stars and the plants and the flowers and the trees and the birds and the animals, the organics. Because, you know, I see the thing about nature is that, you know, Bell Hooks writes about this in Belonging, a Culture, a Place, when our struggle is under human-made systems, then our relief is in the release of systems that are not human-made. Nature is not a human-made system, it never will be. it always overwhelms the human-made system. And that, to me, is a relief as a person who suffers under these systems. For other people who benefit under human systems, that might be frightening. For me, that's quite the opposite of frightening. That's freeing. And so, I mean, I often joke that, like, nature, like under the system, I might be killed or hurt for being poor, black, trans, queer, whatever. Nature might kill me too, but not for those reasons.
Not for that, yeah.
Thusly, nature is truly woke. Nature is the only woke thing. And so for me, to commune with nature is like the doorway into that endless possibility of joy.
I love that essay in your book about just looking at the stars as a little black kid, you know? And it really is a moment of like, like, all that other shit can't touch me.
Yeah, we're not racialized when we look at the stars, or we are, but only in the most beautiful and powerful way.
Anybody else want to do it?
I'll let you know. I'll let you know later when I figure it out. I mean, connection, yes, and there's not joy in the exhalation of it. You know what I mean? But there's something in getting off your chest and someone else being like, "Yup," you know what I mean? Like that's not joy, but it's an approximation of something, of some kind of relief or freedom. Moments of like that makes the other moments that are potentially joyful possible. You know what I mean? Like just that I've been able to like be myself and it's been not rejected. You know what I mean? Like just that of like I can like enjoy music more or whatever. You know what I mean? Like so finding those little things can be more powerful if the lack of joy is acknowledged. For me, it doesn't, I never feel good when people are like, but what about this? I'm like, I know, I fucking know. You know what I mean? But like, I'm ill. And like, so for me, just the joy that can come from being like, I'm not joyful, but like there's still good in the world and like maybe one day I'll have access to it. But like you don't have to pretend that you're joyful right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Like that's all I want. You know what I mean? For us to not have to pretend or like, and that's when it feels like, oh, I'm pandering or I'm giving this to a white audience so they can feel better about themselves because slavery's over, so now she's okay and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So I think for me, a lot of that rebellion of giving people a black joy is that they didn't earn it, you know what I mean? And I think that my black readers get a particular joy from that, if that makes sense. Right. Like it's more like, because I'm not gonna say it's all okay, they're like, that's joy to me, because I can just be my sad self for a second. Like that's there is something to that. I know it sounds a little bit backwards and sad, but like I do think that when we're especially writing in a time when, yes, black pain and suffering or joy it's all marketed. You know what I mean? And black people can feel that when they're reading the work. We're not stupid, you know? And I want to talk directly to folks and not be a product. So I think what happens is that you have to think outside of the linearity of like feeling better versus feeling worse. I want my readers to feel more like themselves. I want to feel like more like myself when I finish the book, and sometimes that's feeling shittier. It is what it is, you know?
I sometimes experience joy. I feel like it's funny because I feel like the three of you have like such a different outlook than I do, but I also am not a writer. And so like, not that I think of any of you as my therapist, but you were saying you write to the page and the page gives back. And for me, I read from the page and the page gives back. I don't think that I'm getting from you, but I do
Readers bring.
Yeah, but like I do feel like it's like the page is the thing, but it isn't that full relationship. But what brings me joy in the work is that I do get to ask the questions and clarify the things because that's by the nature of the work that I get to do. And also,
a thing that brings me joy is called gossip. I love it. And when I get to ask authors questions about the work, it sort of feels like this like literary gossip thing. Like that's why I love my show, because I get to be like, Carvell, we both love Shakespeare. Let's talk about it, right? And in that vein, this is the last question, and then we'll do signing. If you had to say that you were a punctuation mark, what punctuation mark would you be?
Oh God.
So good.
I've never.
The whole time, there were all these really thoughtful answers about joy, and all I could think was just like drugs and dancing. And I was like, think of something that has, but it's really transformed
My answer is
my life.
gossip.
No, as soon as I stopped talking, I was like, I didn't even talk about sex.
Because you know you're an exclamation point.
Yeah.
Stop fucking around, you're an exclamation point.
No, I'm a colon.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I think, I mean, both because it's pleasurable,
And
anality, and then also, like, I feel like the colon is like a doorway between two ways of thinking, two clauses, you know, and there's like
There's like a false.
a move.
Yeah.
Like,
It's opening.
It interrupts, it interrupts the boundary between two ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Which is what
Jasmine
my
Ward is a
colon does.
colon.
Oh.
Jasmine Ward's a colon.
I like that.
It's a good company.
I know, oh my god. I feel like I should change my answer. She can have the colon.
There's enough colons to go around, especially in San Francisco. I overuse the M dash. Like I over fucking use it. I use it all the time. It's a crutch. My editors hate it. I do it when I ghostwrite. It's how you can tell if ghostwriting something is when there's fucking some basketball players just M dashing all up and down the page. You're like, Carvell wrote this shit. So that's my thing. Especially because I actually didn't learn how to use it until like I had been a writer for like 3 or 4 years. I didn't learn how to use it until my 40s. And once I got to it, you could not tear that thing away from me. You can't tell me shit about an M dash. So that's my.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a poem where I say that my body is shaped like a question mark. And so I go with that.
That's so funny.
So literal.
Actually, the line is literally my body shaped like a question
so
mark.
fucking funny. Oh my God.
But you know, I do love a colon. When I first started writing poems, that was like my Emily Dickinson dash. Was just like, I just wanted to create in everyone's head that like this equals this, but like not really. You know? So there's something about that, the like false mirror, I guess. Like this is to this, as this is to this, as this is to this, as this is to that. Like that whole kind of conversation of lots of poems I do like. But yes, question mark, comma maybe.
You can only have one.
I'm sorry, bitch. Have
I asked the questions.
we met? I have 5 exclamations. Like,
That's me. I'm obviously an exclamation point.
you're an emoji, sis.
I'm an emoji. I'm this emoji. I somehow feel like that's an insult, but I'm gonna take it as a compliment. I'm too expressive to just be a punctuation mark. I'm an emoji.
Yes.
Or the red dress girl.
Yes,
That's me. Okay, so we're gonna do they're gonna do signing afterwards, but before they do, I have to say like 3 things. 1, you can get copies of their books from Moad, who is our partner for tonight. They're selling books, so please support them. Please get the books. You can get them signed. Thank you to, and I do this wrong. It's 111 Minna, but I like to say 111 Minna because I used to come here in my 20s and party with my friends when I was young. Now I'm old and I'm talking about books here, so it's weird. It's so weird. And I have 2 things. And then also thank you all for coming and talking about books with us. This is so special. And then the last thing, I did not get approved, but tomorrow is Carvell Wallace's birthday. And I just know he didn't want me to do that at all, and so that's why I did it, because I'm this emoji. So we don't have to sing or anything, but just know that it's a big, exciting birthday, and we get to sort of celebrate. So yes, so thank you everyone, and have a great rest of your night, and
Support
Litquake, donate and stuff, and they've got more events. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.